Hi, I'm Cameron.
And I'm Hayden.
And this is
Until the End of Crime.
What do you know about Lonely Hearts advertisements?
So if I remember correct, well, first off, I'm going to say that me are maybe too young to really have a firm grip on Lonely Hearts Club's advertisements or Lonely Heart advertisements.
Just you?
Well, I said we.
I didn't know what you were saying.
Yeah. We, me, us.
Okay.
Me? Anyway, but I know it's like the escape song, the Pina Colada song. If you like pina coladas, getting lost in the rain, respond to my ad and we'll go back to my home. And so I know that much. You know what it makes me think of is on Craigslist, they used to do the missed connections, which I know it's not the same thing. You could also put up an ad on Craigslist for anything, but the missed connections where you'd be like, it was at the corner of 5th and Haagen-Dazs, and you were sensually sipping your tea, and I was playing on my phone, and for a brief moment, I saw your beautiful smile, and I knew we were meant to be together. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know it's not the same. I liked Misconnections more than I like Lonely Hearts.
Yeah. There was a time I would go read those just for fun, and then I transitioned to reading the FML. All of those posts.
Yes.
Yeah. Phases.
Now I like the AITA, Am I the Asshole?
Yeah. I'm not as into those as I was FML.
Okay.
So you never put out a Lonely Hearts advertisement?
I don't know what it would have said.
Could we maybe say that dating profiles, dating apps are kind of Lonely Hearts advertisements?
Yeah, you can.
The
You
modern
can.
version.
I guess that makes sense. And you swipe left or right on, I guess, what resonates with you.
Yeah. Or some people just swipe right without even looking until they have a match, and then they look to see if they actually would be interested in matching with that person.
I did that before I met Andrew. I was just right. There was actually like an app for Tinder that would go in and literally match you with every single possible person in your area for you. And then it would give you a readout of all of your matches. And then I'd be like, no. I would take them out afterwards.
That's what Roby would do too. All right, let me set the scene for you. Milton, Florida.
Already off to a cool start.
Because of Florida? Or because of Milton?
Milton.
It's May 6th, 1920. Martha...
Another old timey-wimey story.
It is a throwback. Another?
I'm sorry. I just hate them so much. But that's okay. This one's going to be good.
What do you mean, another?
You haven't done another old story yet?
I think the oldest I've done is the Baker Street robbery.
That was old.
That was the 70s.
Archaic.
All right.
Well, I say that, and then I did the cantankerous killing couple. And when did that take place?
Well, you started us in the 30s.
It started us in the 30s.
Yeah, because then they started having kids in the 40s.
You're right. See, I guess that's fair. Go ahead. Tell me about your 1920s Lonely Heart.
1920, Martha Seabrook is born.
Okay.
Martha was born with a glandular problem that caused her to be overweight
Oh, no.
and experience puberty prematurely.
Puberty. So how young was she when she started puberty?
Well, you didn't let me get that far.
Oh, I'm sorry. Puberty.
And to experience puberty prematurely. So by the age of 10, she had the body and sexual drive of an adult woman.
Ugh.
At 13 years old, she suffered sexual abuse at the hands of her brother.
Awful, disgusting, terrible.
And when she disclosed this to her mother blamed her for being assaulted and beat her.
Cool. Awesome. Wonderful. Mother of the Year.
1933.
Kind of tracks for 1933, but that is sick, awful, and deplorable.
Right. My next line is, her mother sounds charming, right? But she often ridiculed Martha for her weight, which again was due to a glandular condition.
Where was her dad?
It does not say.
Huh, okay.
I don't recall any mention of him.
Sorry, I was just thinking if it's a glandular disorder, it came from one of them.
Probably. That doesn't mean that they had it. They
No.
could have just been carrying the
Could have been a
gland.
recessive trait.
Yeah.
How cruel.
Yeah. So she grew up with constant ridicule from her peers and her mother, which caused Martha to withdraw socially. She did not have friends that were close in age to her, but Martha was driven, and she graduated first in her class from nursing school, which she attended in Pensacola. But in the nursing rulebook, it says that you must be attractive and fit to be a nurse, as we all know.
That's step one.
Yeah. So Martha could not find employment in the field.
Okay, so they let her go through with a degree plan.
I mean, her admissions counselor probably should have talked to her about this first, but yes.
I mean, it is sick and disgusting and indicative of what society was and sometimes still is. Did they not have a need for nurses back then? Were they not as scarce as they are now? Why would you reject somebody because they were not attractive enough to be a nurse? Is that where the sexy nurse costume stereotype expectation comes from?
Possibly.
Sorry, that was a lot at once, but I'm devastated for this woman who
graduated first in her class from nursing school and could not get a job because she had a glandular condition that caused her to be overweight.
When it sounds like she could out-nurse any of her peers.
Yeah. But she did, however, take her medical knowledge, her nursing degree, and can you guess what she did with that?
Was a vet tech?
No.
Did she go work as an orderly in a nursing home?
We're getting closer. She worked in a funeral home.
Good.
She prepped female bodies for burial. And as she learned through doing this, cadavers don't make jokes at your expense or care if you're not rail thin.
Okay. I don't want to find out why it was important to include that.
Well, it kind of sounds like I was writing a joke, but that's just what one of the sources said.
Oh, okay.
Cadavers don't make jokes at your expense, and they don't care if you don't look like a supermodel.
So she wouldn't like talk to them or anything or...
No, she just grew up being ridiculed by everybody in her life, and she's finally around human bodies, which did not do that. So she was probably able to be more comfortable in that environment. And so because of that, she found comfort working with these people who were not insulting her or showing prejudice to her. Not long after she completed nursing school in 1942, Martha moved to California and worked in the Army hospital as a nurse. And in the evenings, she'd go to bars and pick up soldiers on leave and bang them.
Oh, so she's a mass murderer.
Not bang like that. It does make the next line not make sense if you put it in that context, because as it sometimes does, this resulted in pregnancy for her.
Oh, no. Okay, so she was having anonymous sex and then she got pregnant.
Correct.
Okay, I'm feeling worse for her now.
Well, the man who had impregnated Martha was not actually interested in her. And I imagine due to the fact that it was the 1940s, he didn't react well to finding out she was pregnant because he threw himself off of a bridge into a bay in an attempt to commit suicide.
Okay, I'm sorry to laugh.
Right.
But he was so upset about having impregnated Martha and what that might mean for him that he thought, no, it's better if I just end it than if I were to have to deal with this.
Right.
Surely there was more going on.
I mean, I don't think that people who are lacking a predisposition to suicidal ideation attempt to throw themselves off a bridge when faced with a difficult situation.
Yeah. When it first scanned across my brain, the reason I think I was brought to laughter is because in my mind, he was like, oh God, Martha is so unattractive to me that I can't imagine having to spend my life with her and a child I didn't want.
Well, I think that that is a similar take to how Martha maybe interpreted this, because her self-esteem already wasn't great.
Right.
So I think that it took another hit when this man would literally rather die than marry me. But he had no problem knocking me up.
Right.
So she was ashamed.
Yeah.
And she returned to Florida and told everyone about the baby's father. He was an officer in the Navy who had loved and married her. But she just got a telegraph. He died in combat. So that's why he didn't come to Florida to be with me. But look at this ring I'm wearing on my finger. Proof. So stop asking about him. He's dead. Rest his soul.
Okay.
And the town of Milton mourned the loss of Martha's husband with her.
That was nice of them. Is it the same people who bullied her?
It did not say in the source material if it was the same people or not. But fortunately, she quickly found herself a new husband.
Oh, good. Okay. A real one?
Yeah, Alfred Beck. The two had become pregnant, so I assume that they did not go over how that happens in nursing school in the 40s. They married and they lived a blissful married life for 6 months.
Why just 6 months?
Because that's when they divorced.
They went from being blissful to divorced in 6 months?
I may have thrown blissful in.
Okay.
May have been adding some color there.
Okay.
So at this point, Martha had 2 young children, no job, no income, and therefore she either needed to find herself a man who would be able to take care of her and her kids, or she needed a job. She was finally able to find work at a children's hospital in Pensacola, and she did a good job, as you might expect somebody who graduated first in their class at nursing school would. She was an attentive and intelligent nurse, despite her obesity and the lack of attractiveness that, again, made her unqualified everywhere else she had applied. Martha took her nursing responsibilities very seriously and was promoted by the end of the year to the nurse superintendent.
Oh, okay, Martha. I like this redemption arc that she's getting.
You know who didn't like this redemption arc?
Her mother?
Some of her coworkers. It seems that they maybe were envious that Martha was doing so well in the career that they had all chosen. So one of these coworkers sent her an advertisement for her to join a Lonely Hearts Club. And
Dude, people are so cruel.
well, I feel like you can probably relate to how Martha reacted, because out of defiance, she did submit a Lonely Hearts advertisement.
Feels right.
Yeah. I can just see you seeing somebody try to make you the butt of a joke and being like, oh my gosh, thank you. I am so good.
Yeah, it wouldn't take much.
So, as I said, she had applied to the Lonely Hearts Club, and she waited for the day her prince would come and take her away from her humdrum life. And fortunately for her, a man by the name of Raymond Fernandez was ready in wait, and all too happy to respond to her ad. Raymond Martinez Fernandez was born in Hawaii to Spanish parents on December 17th, 1914.
And she was born in 1920.
Yes.
So 6 years her senior.
Yeah.
Okay.
Raymond was a small, frail-looking baby, which was quite the disappointment for his father, who wanted to just do a little tradesy so he could have a stronger son. But it's not really how things work, so
He wanted to trade out his baby?
yeah, because he looked sickly.
Where was he going to trade the baby?
I guess
The baby swap
the
meet?
next bassinet that looked a little bit chunkier. Seems like he probably would have been happy if Raymond had a glandular condition.
Oh.
So Martha's mom, unhappy with Martha's size. Raymond's dad, unhappy with Raymond's size.
A match made in heaven.
So like I said, born in Hawaii, and then 3 years later, his family moved to Connecticut. And then 17 years later, when Raymond was 20, he moved to Spain, to his uncle's farm, and he met and married Encarnacion Robles, and they had 4 children together. At the start of the Second World War, Raymond worked with the Spanish military, but then switched gears and worked for the British government as a spy, where he was respected and commended for his loyalty and willingness to fulfill dangerous tasks.
Wow, it sounds like Raymond was brave.
Seems like the British government also agrees. After the war, at the end of 1945, Raymond decided he wanted to go back to America for work and boarded a ship with the intention of sending for his wife and their 4 children once he had established a stable place for them. But while he was on the ship, he was heading up to the deck and the steel hatch fell onto his head, leaving a permanent indentation and altered personality, as we know can happen with physical trauma to the head and brain.
How weird. Okay, you might be getting to this, but I'm curious as to whether or not the location of the indentation or the injury informs what kind of personality change he experienced.
I can't tell you exactly where on the head it was, other than it's the top where the steel hatch fell down. But I do talk about the type of changes to his personality. Once the ship docked, Raymond was hospitalized for about 3 months. And
That's a significant amount of time.
yeah. And when he got out of the hospital, he boarded a ship to Alabama.
On purpose?
I don't know, maybe as a result of his injury because the type of injury he suffered likely caused him to lose impulse control and reasoning skills.
Okay.
Which could explain why he made the rash decision of stealing belongings that were clearly labeled on the ship, mainly clothing, and he was arrested when he tried to go through customs with the stolen goods. I wonder if after he got off the original ship, because he was clearly in no state to carry his own stuff off the ship, if his belongings were taken off or if he was trying to get clothing because nobody had thought to take his stuff off the ship for him.
Right.
But he was sentenced to a year in prison for stealing.
For stealing clothes?
Well, they were clearly labeled.
A year for clothes?
Yeah.
Okay. For perspective, not to bring the case up again, Mary Vincent's attempted murderer spent 7 years in prison for attempted murder.
While incarcerated, Raymond met a Haitian man who was a follower of the ancient religion Vodun, where the practice of voodoo comes from.
Okay.
This man taught Raymond about voodoo and black magic. Through this newfound knowledge of and use of voodoo, Raymond convinced himself that he had, you know what, maybe he didn't convince himself. Maybe this was real, but he believed that he had power over women who would be overcome with erotic sexual desire for him through the energy of the Vodun.
Do you get to choose how you use that energy?
Just women.
Or they're just drawn to him?
Just women.
They're like, oh yeah, give me some of that.
Yeah, so this is what he channeled his energy into during his year in prison. I'm not really sure what gave him this belief because it was a male prison.
A brain injury.
So I'm not sure how he verified that this power was with him, but when he was released, he moved to Brooklyn to live with his sister.
And she was overcome by sexual desire.
Much like my neighbor in his boat jamming to music right now.
Do you think there's any way he doesn't know that that's disruptive to his neighbors?
To just be playing it that loud out on your boat in a neighborhood, having it cranked up as loud as you can possibly get it.
Surely one of your neighbors is going to be like, what the fuck, guy?
While living with his sister, he shut himself away and responded via letter to Lonely Hearts advertisements that women posted.
Did he think that they were seeking him out?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think that he was that.
He sounds pretty delulu.
Well, the women who responded to his letters would get the voodoo moves put on them, or Raymond's interpretation of what the voodoo moves were. I don't want to imply that he was actually practicing this religion.
Right. Was he doing real Voldoon? Probably not.
But once he gained their trust and successfully seduced them, he would steal valuable possessions and money from them in order to supplement his income in lieu of getting a job. And not that you needed to be reminded, but Raymond was still married to Encarnacion, who was in Spain caring for their 4 children. So
Does he remember his wife and children?
Yes. And I think he was sending money to them as well.
Oh, okay. Well, as long as he's sending money.
I think. I don't know that for sure. In 1947, Fernandez wrote to Jane Thompson, and they met after exchanging several letters. In October of the same year, they bought cruise tickets to travel to Spain, much like we're going to do with Vanessa. Mm-hmm. And after several weeks of traveling around Spain, he took Jane to meet his wife and children. And Raymond, Jane, and Encarnacion were seen out together having dinner.
What?
And they seemed to have a pleasant dynamic.
Okay. Did Encarnacion understand what the fuck was going on?
Possibly.
Did Jane?
Possibly.
Okay.
So, despite what I can only imagine were weird circumstances, which probably came to a head on the night of November 7th, when the 2 women allegedly broke ties. Jane and Raymond retreated to their hotel room, and it is speculated that they argued. Late that night, Raymond was witnessed running from the room, and the following morning, Jane's body was found.
Okay. Murder.
The cause of death was unknown, but not apparent.
It's not unknown. It's not unknown.
Well, it was not apparent, and the body was taken and buried without having an autopsy performed.
And this was Jane.
This was Jane.
She was an American citizen. No kind of evaluation was performed. And she was buried in Spain?
That is what it seems like, yeah.
Was her family contacted? Did they know who she was?
I don't know if they knew who she was.
Okay.
Raymond left town again, abandoning his wife and his 4 children, and he went back to New York with a forged will of Jane's that gave him ownership of her apartment, which is where her mother had been living, and he swiftly kicked her out and set up shop for his Lonely Hearts correspondence business. So I imagine if he's got a forged will, that there has to be some conversation about she's dead.
Right.
But that's the most information I have about that.
I'm sure there probably isn't a lot of detail about what happened to her mother. I know that he cannot process correctly. That has been established by the steel plate, causing him a traumatic brain injury. But kicking out the mother of the woman he murdered after forging her signature on a false will is wild. That in and of itself could be the story.
It does seem like a step too far.
At some point, right? Something went over the line somewhere. Maybe I can't pinpoint it, but it all feels like maybe it's a bit much.
Yeah. Well, it's not the last time that Raymond won't exactly be able to pinpoint where he crossed the line.
Okay.
2 weeks after she posted her Lonely Hearts ad, right before Christmas 1947, Martha received Raymond's reply. He told her he worked in the trade business, which was how he made his fortune, and had recently immigrated to America to improve his opportunities for business.
Where did he say that he immigrated from? Spain? Did he at least keep it semi-real?
Must have been. Well, he was not born in America.
Right.
So he had semi-recently immigrated to America. He didn't say. I don't know where he said.
Okay.
Because he was only in Spain for 2 months.
Oh, he's not from Spain? Oh, he's from Hawaii.
He was born in Hawaii in 1914, and Hawaii did not become a state until 1959.
Okay.
So, but his parents were Spanish.
Okay.
He spoke about how Martha's nursing career reflected her character as someone nurturing, loving, and generous.
That sounds like the Martha I know.
I think an emphasis on generous and career were important to him. Martha swooned. She swayed. She carried the letter around, reading it repeatedly.
Swooning and swaying.
And remember, she only did this ad out of defiance because her coworker was an asshole.
Yeah, to shame her bitch of a coworker.
She bought fancy stationery and wrote him back.
Ooh.
Probably spritzed it with some perfume.
And all he thought was cash cow. I have fancy paper.
Yeah. They corresponded for 2 weeks, during which he used the strategic script that he had developed after figuring out the most effective ways to gain the trust of women who were speaking with a stranger through the mail.
Okay.
I don't know the exact strategy,
Okay.
but he had been refining it. He knew what did and didn't work based on all of the other Lonely Hearts ads he had responded to.
I thought you meant that you were able to outline what his strategy was.
No, it just said that the number that he responded to, not everybody responded to him. So he was able to figure out what to include in the letters to get an initial response. And then he was able to determine what was the most effective way to keep the women engaged in responding to him.
Okay, so he was able to make some pretty basic determinations about how he could gain the attention of one of these lonely heart women.
Yeah, through
And
trial
then
and
keep it.
error. Yeah.
Okay.
So
It's a lot of reasoning for someone with a traumatic brain injury that affects judgment.
impulse control for sure. So Martha's work as a nurse may have reflected her caring nature, but to Raymond, it also indicated that she probably had money, especially because, remember, she was holding an advanced position as a nurse superintendent.
And she wrote on advanced stationery.
That's true. And money and generosity was what he looked for in all of his victims, as he had figured out he could do.
I'm sorry, victims?
Yes.
I think you mean lovers.
Lover victims.
I think you mean conquests.
Well, it seemed like the only thing he was interested in conquering was their wallets. I mean, remember, they also were overcome by
Voldoon.
by a sexual erotic desire for him. So there was no conquering to be done there. He just had to convince them to also give him money.
Really easy strategy. Simple. He's got it. I see it.
So as he figured out he could do, Raymond made a living by conning women into trusting him and then stealing whatever he could of value from them. These women, who had been so desperate and hopeful when they posted their Lonely Hearts ads, were too ashamed to file reports with the police once they figured out that they had been had by Raymond. In more ways than one, it sounds like. Part of Raymond's routine with these women was to ask them to send a lock of their hair, which he then used in a voodoo ritual to create the irresistible magnetism that he was able to woo them with, solidifying his plan.
Getting a lock of hair sounds difficult, but I suppose if you are mailing back and forth between you and a lonely heart person, it's probably not hard to convince them that you need a lock of their hair.
Yeah. I don't think that it would be that difficult to get someone to send you a lock of their hair when you consider that the women were writing Lonely Hearts advertisements. Also, to me, a lock of their hair, isn't that something that, like, back in the day?
It sounds like some old-timey keepsake bullshit. It sounds normal for back then.
Right, but he was not doing normal things with it. He was practicing an ancient religion, probably incorrectly. Considering these women were writing Lonely Hearts advertisements, it probably really boosted the efficacy of his rituals, victimology.
Almost like Voldoon had nothing to do with it.
I mean, we wouldn't go that far. But at this point, I would like to point out that Vodun has a bad rep for being considered evil, but it isn't. It's a religion that originated in West African culture. The belief is that there are spirits that govern the earth. I would especially like to note that, as tends to happen with religions, Raymond was not someone who practiced Vodun. He exploited elements of the religion and certain practices and rituals to further his own agenda in taking advantage of women.
Oh, that sounds familiar. Certainly doesn't sound like it's something that's limited to Voldoon.
Well, you said it.
I'll say it again. I could go on a soapbox, but I think that genuine heretics run the church today. Because where is God's love when your pulpit is filled with someone who would choose to spew hate? So that's not to say every religious institution for sure. But if you build your foundation off of hateful practices intentionally, I think you're kind of missing the point of God and Jesus and faith.
I think the longer running it is, the more watered down it becomes. And that's why I said that people pick and choose elements to use. If we're talking Christianity, they take little snippets from the Bible and use those to spew hatred. Sometimes, unless it's a wedding, then it's First Corinthians.
Then it's First Corinthians, and that shit does go hard. That is a good verse.
Anyway.
Love is patient, love is kind.
It does not envy, it does not boast.
Yeah.
I read it yesterday while I was getting my dress hemmed for my sister's wedding on the wall.
That's a classic. It's a good one. I guess some would argue the entire Bible is a classic.
Classic piece of literature.
Okay. Skewing sacrilegious at this point. Anyway.
After he performed this ritual with Martha's hair, he got on a train and headed to Florida to finally meet her.
He could have never done a ritual, and Martha still would have. He could have hit it any way he wanted to.
Okay. Martha was ecstatic. When Raymond arrived, she introduced him to her children and cooked a big dinner for the four of them. I am literally only including this next bit of information, even though it does not contribute to the story whatsoever, because I read a source that felt it was very important and necessary to include. Once the children went to bed, Raymond put the moves on Martha.
Okay.
She succumbed to them.
Uh-huh.
Succumbed was a weird word.
Ooh, choices. Choices.
She was just thrilled that he would even be interested in her. And for the first time ever, she attained sexual fulfillment. Maybe succumbed wasn't a weird word.
It sounds a lot like she cummed.
Okay. All right. And
I'm glad that Martha was fulfilled.
Okay. Let's take a moment to shake off the way that was phrased.
She sure shook it off.
There was some drama next that I didn't think was all that important. So, in short, Martha declared her love. Raymond was like, whoa, I got some business in New York that I got to get back to, but I'll send money so you can visit me next. And Martha was like, oh my God, he proposed, and told the town as much. Raymond was like, that's not what happened. I am not coming back to Florida. And Martha attempted suicide, which made Raymond concede that she could come stay with him for 2 weeks.
You know, it's such a difficult issue to discuss when we talk about suicide, especially in terms of most people know someone who has been in a relationship where suicide or self-harm has been threatened. I think that most people could say to a degree that they've either had experience with it personally or they know someone who has. And you and I know firsthand that some people do genuinely act on that and but they actually do complete the act of suicide because of that. And it sounds like Martha made a very similar attempt. And I think it has to be really difficult to navigate. And of course, this is only tangentially related to the story you're telling me, but navigating the difference between a manipulation and an actual cry for help. And in this instance, I think some of the things that Martha does is comical in the way that it's so outlandish. It doesn't seem real. How could someone do that?
I think you're onto something, because it sounds to me like you think that Martha was doing this to manipulate Raymond, and
she's also a known liar.
Right. But I don't know what she did when she was making an attempt on her life. But after she did it, he was like, okay, you can come stay with me in New York for 2 weeks, which she did. So clearly it wasn't something that required hospitalization. And if it were...
Also, how did he know?
I think he was still there.
Oh, okay.
I'm not really sure. I know that she was there for a phenomenal fortnight and then returned to Florida, where she was promptly fired without explanation.
Okay.
She assumed that it had something to do with her relationship with Raymond and how scandalous it was.
What about it was scandalous?
Well, she was unmarried.
Okay.
And they shared a bed, if you recall. And then she said that they were engaged, but then he told everybody we're not engaged. And then she tried to harm herself, at which point she went and stayed with him for 2 weeks. So
when you put it like that, it feels like they made the right decision.
I don't think that they regretted it.
Talk about a liability and liability.
But I think what Martha took it as was a sign. So she packed up herself and her 2 little kiddos, and the 3 of them landed on Raymond's doorstep.
Did he know that they were going to land on his doorstep?
No, it was more than he had bargained for. Because if you recall, he worked from home at Raymond's Lonely Hearts Scams Incorporated. So he didn't really want to give up his office space for, a kid's room. It doesn't say definitively even if he moved out of his sister's house either.
Okay.
Or sister's apartment. So I'm not sure exactly how cozy this living situation was. But he did let them stay because Martha, for some reason that I couldn't possibly understand, catered to his every whim.
Again, with me maybe making too sweeping of a generalization, I think most people know someone who have so little self-esteem that they will do anything to be in a relationship or to be with somebody or to keep somebody. And so I don't find it all that surprising that someone who had been teased their entire life, who felt so undesirable all their life, who had a man
who swooned when a man wrote to her to respond to her Lonely Hearts advertisement, and then even more so was shocked and baffled that he was interested in having a sexual relationship with her. It makes me wonder about the men that she would bed when she was living in California, that she would pick up at the bar.
It feels like it was probably they paper bagged her head and did what they want. That's the whole vibe, right?
Right.
And so we get this feeling, or I get this feeling, this sensation, this thought that she would probably do anything to keep a man who would love her outwardly or at least some semblance of that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she kept the apartment clean. She cooked. She did all of the domestic things, but she wasn't working. She was doing all of that stuff at the apartment, and he didn't work. He worked in the apartment. And so the kids cramped his style, and he insisted that they leave. So a week after they showed up, Martha loaded the kids up, drove them to the Salvation Army, and left them there.
How old were they?
This is what, 47, 48? She was 22 when she had the oldest one, and she was born in 20. So the oldest one would have been about 5.
Oh, God.
Yeah, she abandoned them and didn't have any contact with them for 3 years.
Okay.
Which feels like a surprisingly short amount of time after abandoning your children, because I don't think you should get to have contact with them again after that. That's crazy.
Right.
So after abandoning her kids in the name of love, Raymond realized that Martha's commitment to him was serious.
I'm glad it only took her abandoning her children.
And he told her about how he had been scamming women and had every intention of doing the same to her initially. And Martha was like, cool, can I get in on this with you? What can I do to help? Would you like me to fluff your chair cushion for you? You've been sitting for a while. At this point, they began planning for the next victim. Martha would play the role of Raymond's sister-in-law in Pennsylvania after he responded to Esther Henn's ad. Esther and Raymond got married approximately 1 month after Martha dropped her kids off at the Salvation Army, and the three lived together in Jane Thompson's apartment. That's right, he did move out of his sister's after he assumably murdered Jane, forged the will, and then kicked her mother out of the apartment that she had been living in.
These women have to be some of the loneliest,
Think about the time.
homeliest.
Think about the time.
I know, Cameron, but life for women was terrible. Life for anyone who wasn't a white man was awful then, granted. But I think there is a fish in the sea for everybody. I think everyone's got a partner, and I think they just have to be open and ready to find them. But in these instances, your partner can't be Raymond. That's nobody's. You know what? Honestly, the way that she's willing and ready to go on these schemes, she might be his one true partner. But Esther Henn had no idea what she was getting into.
No, I doubt she even knew that it was not his apartment.
I don't know how that thought started, but this is where we're at now.
Well, according to Esther, Raymond was a very sweet husband for 4 days. He then harangued her when she would not transfer her insurance policies and teacher's pension into his name. After word traveled through the grapevine to Esther about a woman going on a cruise with Raymond and dying.
Word? That was a rumor?
That was Jane.
Yeah, but how did that get back to Esther Henn?
Jane's mom had to know she was dead. Remember, he showed up with the forged will and kicked her out of the apartment. So there had to be word that she had gone. I mean, that is just true. She went on a cruise with him and died.
That's true. You're right.
Esther quickly noped the fuck out of there, sans hundreds of dollars and her car, which Raymond had obviously stolen from her. This process repeated itself several more times in quick succession. A woman from Arkansas named Myrtle married Raymond, and Martha made it her mission to not allow the marriage to be consummated by sharing a bed with Myrtle.
Martha, you've got to at least go along with the scheme.
After a few nights, Myrtle protested this ludicrous behavior, and Raymond drugged her into unconsciousness, and he and Martha packed her onto a bus that was Arkansas bound. The police had to carry her off the bus when she arrived in Little Rock, and she died the next day in hospital.
You know, the things that you could do in the 1940s, load up a drugged body onto a bus and say, all right, adios.
Pretty wild and awful. I'm curious about the inconspicuous people packing the unconscious girl onto the bus without arousing any suspicion.
Yeah.
Either which way, they made $4,000 off of Myrtle. In today's money, that is a little over $52,000 equivalent.
Not enough to kill someone over. Not
they just
enough
drugged
to
her.
kill someone over.
Were they intending to kill her? I don't know.
They didn't care.
You're right.
Also, this bitch nurse didn't have any idea about dosing. To be fair, I don't know what nurses nurses were taught then.
And to be fair, I don't know that she was taking lead on anything that was going on here.
And if we're being honest, I think if she had any say, she'd be like, yeah, she tried to fuck you. Let's dose her good.
Well, there is that.
I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah.
She's they're both unhinged.
There's room for growth on both accounts.
I don't think I want them to grow.
Well, after minimal success in finding wealthy victims on their way back to New York, the couple made it back to their apartment and continued living off the money they had stolen from Myrtle. But as winter approached, the money dwindled. And that was when Janet Fay, a widow, landed on their radar. Janet lived in Albany in a large apartment, and she had money. She was religious, which was conveyed in her Lonely Hearts ad, which gave Raymond a strong angle to approach from.
She also practiced Voldoon?
Oh no, he included references to religion and God in his letters to her. Days before the 1949 New Year would be celebrated, Raymond and Martha headed to Albany and checked into a hotel. Raymond went to meet Janet, brought her flowers, and the two spent the day talking about religion. No word on which religions, but I'm pretty sure it was Christianity. A few days later, Raymond brought Martha to meet Janet, introducing her as his sister, and they all spent the day together. And Janet permitted the two to stay the night in her apartment. After a few more days, Raymond proposed. Janet accepted, and they made plans and arrangements to move to Long Island, including Janet cleaning out all of her financial accounts in Albany. January 4th, the trio moved into an apartment that Martha had already rented out for them. They had dinner, and then it's a little unclear on what exactly transpired next. The best I could tell, Janet and Raymond were naked in bed together. No word on if they had gotten married or not. Not that it matters. And Martha came in, saw them, and lost her shit.
Blind rage.
She blacked out, and when she came to, Janet was bleeding profusely from a wound that was caused by a ball-peen hammer.
A ball-peen hammer?
Yes. She was also garroted with a scarf. After her death, Raymond and Martha cleaned the room, wrapped the body in towels and sheets, moved it into a closet, and went to sleep.
Sleeping after a casual murder.
Yeah, well, a blackout, rage, murder.
Yeah.
They were probably tired from... I don't imagine bleeding profusely from a wound caused by a ball-peen hammer didn't make a mess.
Well, and Raymond was already tired after coitus with Janet Fay.
Yes. So the next day, they bought a trunk, they put the body in it, and took it to Raymond's sister's house, where they convinced her to keep it in the basement.
Did she know it was a body?
I don't think so.
Okay.
11 days later, Raymond returned to retrieve the trunk. He and Martha buried it, covered the grave with cement.
I'm sorry. 11 days.
11 days.
This body was rotting in a trunk, and the sister thought nothing?
I'm sure it was a smell-proof trunk. No odors escaped.
That feels like wildly advanced technology for the 1940s.
Do you think? I think that things were, they weren't doing...
heavier
right,
duty.
They were heavier duty. There's no pressed particle board or anything like that at the time. The material's thicker. It's a higher quality.
Yeah, that's true.
They also may have, I guess I don't know when trash bags were invented, but they may have had another way to wrap the body to prevent it from.
Right.
Don't they strike you as masterminds that would be able to...
They strike me as two sloppy, murderous pigs.
Well, maybe the sister was a hoarder or had not cleaned her house in years, and so it was
maybe
just
they cut her
another
in.
smell. Maybe.
I forget that he was an upstanding man prior to his brain injury.
I don't know that was true. He was Spanish by birth, but not born in Spain. He was born to Spanish parents, and then he betrayed Spain by working as a spy for the British government.
Right.
I don't know that...
But he used to care about Encarnacion and his children.
Yeah, he was gonna send for them once he established himself in America, but that was before the steel hatch fell on his head. I surmised that he sent money back, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay.
Either way, he had already suffered the injury at that point, so even if he had, none of that speaks to that. I don't know that we...
However, whichever.
I don't know that we know enough about his personality beforehand, because I think that somebody who is Spanish by heritage betraying Spain to spy for the British government after after working as a soldier for the Spanish military. Probably not the most stand-up guy.
I don't know about the history of what was going on with Spain and Britain at that time, so I cannot even, I don't know.
I suppose that's fair. Okay, so like I was saying, buried the trunk, covered the grave with cement, and then cashed Janet's checks for her. They also wrote letters to her family on typewriters so the family wouldn't grow concerned after not hearing from Janet.
How much money did they make off Janet?
It doesn't give me an exact amount, but
Okay.
it seems that they were collecting and cashing her checks as they were coming in.
Got it. Okay.
But Janet's family was sharp. They knew Janet didn't have a typewriter, nor did she know how to type. So Raymond and Martha's efforts were actually counterproductive because the letters are what caused the family enough concern that they notified the police. Raymond and Martha had already had a new victim in play, so they headed to Grand Rapids, Michigan to meet Delphine Downing, a widow and the mother of a 2-year-old daughter, Raynell. Delphine welcomed Raymond and his sister, Martha, and she liked Raymond. She thought they had a future together. They began banging it out on the regular.
You really like that word today.
And Martha felt as many sisters do, jealous and enraged.
Ah, yes. That's the natural sibling reaction.
But not like hit you over the head with a hammer enraged, you know?
Right. A much more demure rage.
But one fateful day, Delphine happened upon Raymond without his toupee and felt that she had been deceived.
She's not wrong.
His scar and baldness shocked her, and she became upset. Nothing could calm her down, so Martha convinced her to take some sleeping pills. While she slept under the influence of the pills, Raynell began to cry, which Martha could not stand, and she began to choke the child, visibly bruising her neck. Raymond grew concerned that Delphine would wake to find the bruises on her daughter and go to the police, so he retrieved her late husband's handgun and shot her in the head with it in front of Raynell and dug a hole in the basement, cementing over the hole once they had placed her body in it.
And what happened to Raynell?
Raynell was obviously traumatized by witnessing the murder of her mother, and she refused to eat and cried almost constantly. So after 2 days, Raymond and Martha drowned her and buried her next to her mother.
Ugh.
And then they went to the movies.
Disgusting. Awful.
When they came back, they packed up and were getting ready to get on their way when the police knocked on the door because neighbors had grown suspicious of the two and had called police.
Thank God. This is an instance where we're talking about an older case and neighbors decided it was okay to be nosy.
Right.
I'm so glad.
Right.
Oh, I hope their terror is coming to an end.
Raymond was happy to sing like a canary about how original a killer he was.
Of course.
And he gave a long-winded written confession about the 17 women they had killed to the Michigan police because he knew that Michigan did not have the death penalty.
They had killed 17 women? Mm-hmm. Oh my God, that's a lot more than I thought.
Well, I said that they had done this over and over in quick succession, and I only had
that's
actual
right.
information on a few, but
Okay.
apparently 17. He did not anticipate Michigan taking the confession and passing it along to the New York police for the murder of Janet Faye, nor did he plan on Michigan extraditing the pair to New York. Because Michigan didn't have an electric chair, I think that the logic was that Michigan not being a state with the death penalty, they would not extradite him to New York because New York does. Mm-hmm. But at the very least, the crime against Janet Faye was committed in New York. So as far as I understand it, he would have to go through the legal system to answer for that crime in the jurisdiction where the crime took place. Also, I know that there are countries and maybe providences that don't extradite if the extradition would result in a death penalty case, or they only extradite if there is an agreement in place that the death penalty is not on the table. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that happens interstate transfers. So when they went to trial, Raymond tried to recant his confession.
Bet he did.
Yeah, claiming that he only gave it in an attempt to absolve his sweetheart, Martha, of having to answer for the crimes that she committed all by herself.
Oh.
He had confessed in the name of love.
Talk about insult to injury.
Martha took the stand as well. It wasn't super interesting. She did say that she had told Raymond to put the scarf around Janet's neck to make a tourniquet with it because her training as a nurse taught her that that was how you stopped the bleeding of a head wound.
Okay. Interesting way to frame that.
And she said this with a straight face. They were both found guilty, unshockingly, and both were sentenced to death. After dropping her children off at the Salvation Army, Martha did not have any contact with them until she was in prison. They are not the only people she corresponded with because in a surprise turn of events, inmates were able to stay in communication. So she and Raymond were also in contact, which I don't believe is a thing in 2024.
No.
So there they are, writing back and forth. I love you. No, I love you. I love you more. No, you hang up or whatever. Can I just say that for all the reasons stated at the beginning of this case, and then some, the media loved Martha.
Like making fun of her?
Well, probably.
Yeah.
Probably. This love of Martha was just reignited when a rumor began of her banging one of the prison guards at Sing Sing.
Because you know she did.
Where both Raymond and Martha were on death row. According to the media, she was fat, ugly, a terrible mother, a moron, sexually abnormal and perverse. And now she was super unloyal to her love, Raymond.
I just don't know why that's an important part at this point.
Really, the most important thing to note is the media had a heyday with Martha.
Yeah.
It was not quite so much fun for her, but I also imagine that being killed by her didn't feel super nice. So I don't know. I hate that the media was slut shaming, weight shaming, everything but crime and murder shaming. But the media doesn't care about you if you're boring and if you're not scamming and killing people.
Right.
So I guess the crimes didn't need to be reported on so much as they reported on Martha for all of these other negative things because she committed the crimes. But I think that we could have probably just kept it to she was a murderous woman who was in on this scheme to kill other women for money.
Media, it's interesting to see that we still and then sensationalize any way that we can. Sure, this woman is a murderess, but let's talk about what a troll she is and how ugly she is and how fat and slutty she is. It makes me wonder, how did they report on Raymond? Did they talk about any of his shortcomings outside of being a murderer?
It doesn't say. I think that maybe he was kind of the butt of the Martha joke because he had gone on record trying to claim that he had only confessed to save her, that he was willing to take the fall for her because he just loved her so much. And then they're saying that she had sex with a guard.
So they're shaming him through Martha.
I think so.
So Martha is slandered through her physical shortcomings. And he is also slandered through Martha's physical and romantic shortcomings or perception of them.
Possibly. But it turns out that she was not, in fact, sleeping with any guard.
She was sleeping with all the guards.
No. Martha accused Raymond of starting the rumor. Because he filed papers with the courts claiming he should be released due to the mental turmoil that this betrayal caused him.
Oh my God.
Martha and Raymond got past it, though.
Of course they did.
It was just a pattern of their relationship, which was described as love-hate once they were incarcerated. And Raymond and his wife, Encarnacion, were still writing letters, sending their love to each other and to and from the children, unbeknownst to Martha. Which I know that Martha thought she was in on the scamming and ignored the fact that he wrote her to scam her as well. So I think we can probably agree that Martha was still scammed. She ended up in a life of crime in order to please this man who she thought was as loyal to and in love with her as she was him. But he was just a con man through and through. She ultimately landed on death row for this guy, with this guy. On March 8th, 1951, both Raymond and Martha were set to be executed. And as the time of their death grew closer, Martha got a note to Raymond expressing her love to him, and he said that this love made him feel as if he was on top of the world and he was ready to die like a man.
Wow.
Both of them made declarations about how they were in love or how they committed these crimes in the name of love, and both were executed. via electric chair.
I'm stunned. I'm speechless.
By which part?
Martha was complicit.
Yes.
And she did terrible, evil, foul, dirty deeds.
I think in some of the cases, she was more than complicit. She was the murderer.
She was the actor, the primary agent. But I think, like you were just saying, the scam that was run on Martha never ended. And it played through to the very end. And
she abandoned her children.
Right.
Because she believed that this man loved her. And in committing that act of abandonment of her offspring, that was what made Raymond truly believe that she cared for him enough for her to be trusted.
Well, and it's like she is at the end of the day, she's a convenience, a dependable convenience. There is no line that she will not cross for him. And he knows that she'll do all the dirty work of whatever he asks her to do.
Right.
And her desperation for love and acceptance and this kind of, to her, what I'm sure she believed to be unconditional love was more important than anything else. And maintaining it, having it, saying that it was hers was probably more important to her than anything else.
Yeah.
What a terrible situation.
17 women and I assume one child.
Well, at least one.
At least one child, but 3 child victims. I guess 7, because his kids were in Spain without him.
I know there's probably no way to know, but I would love how her children fared through life.
Probably better than if they had stayed with her. Well, I don't know. In the 40s?
Group homes?
Maybe. It's hard to know.
Probably not well.
Yeah. I don't think it would have been great either way, with or without her.
Fantastic case.
Thanks. I did mention suicide a couple times. So I do want to say that if you are experiencing suicidal thoughts or if you are in mental crisis, you can always call 988, which is a mental health hotline. There will be somebody there who can talk to you and help you. A complete list of sources and any links can be found in the show notes.
And that's all we've got for this episode. If you enjoyed listening and want to hear more, please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. And if you want to go the extra mile, listener, make sure you download all of our episodes. Downloads drive traffic, they drive success, and without those downloads, it's harder for us to continue to make this glorious podcast that pumps into your ears every Thursday. So make sure you download.
You can also help us out tremendously by recommending us to a friend. And make sure that you're following us at End of Crime Pod on Instagram.
And like us on Facebook at Until the End of Crime. And join our discussion group.
Our email address is endofcrimepod@gmail.com. So send us an email with questions, requests, or episode suggestions.
Thank you for listening.
Until the next crime.